There was a time when summer didn't start with an airport queue, but with the smell of salt on the breeze and the excited rattle of a suitcase on the pavement. From the 1950s to the 1980s, British holidays were stitched together with simple joys, fish and chips eaten straight from the paper, laughter carried on the wind, and days that seemed to last forever. These weren't just getaways, they were the backdrop to our happiest family moments. Today, let's open that old photo album in our minds and remember 10 British holiday traditions we've left behind and still hold in our hearts. Number 10. Sending holiday postcards. Long before texts and social media updates, the postcard was the way to share your holiday. Gift shops were lined with racks of them. Glossy photos of the pier, the seafront at sunset, or the town's cheeky cartoon cards. Choosing the right one was part of the ritual. You'd sit at the table in your guest house or on a bench along the promenade, pen in hand, thinking of just the right thing to say. Weather's lovely or wish you were here often did the trick. The stamp went on and you'd drop it into the nearest red post box, not minding that it might arrive after you'd returned home. In the 1950s and 60s, millions were sent each summer. As phone calls got cheaper and instant messaging arrived, the habit faded. Still, finding an old postcard in a drawer today feels like finding a tiny, sun-soaked piece of the past. Number 9. Rock pools and shrimping nets. Armed with a little bucket and a net from the souvenir shop, you could spend hours exploring rock pools at low tide. Each pool was its own tiny world, crabs scuttling sideways, shrimps darting like quicksilver, and seaweed swaying in the gentle current. Sometimes you'd find nothing at all, and sometimes you'd lift a stone to discover a whole community underneath. Parents would watch from the seawall or sit on blankets, letting the afternoon slip by while you searched. There was no cost, no timetable, just the slow rhythm of the tide and the thrill of a new discovery. By the 1980s, more families were drawn to indoor attractions and foreign beaches, and the sight of children bent over rock pools became rarer. But for those who remember, the smell of seaweed and the cool splash of seawater on your legs is a holiday memory that never fades. Number 8. End-of-pier variety shows. On a summer evening, the end of the pier was alive with promise. You'd walk past the arcade, past the smell of toffee apples and salt water, until you reached the little theater jutting out over the waves. Inside, velvet seats creaked as people settled in for the night's entertainment. A mix of comedians, singers, dancers, and the occasional novelty act that defied description. The performers weren't always perfect, but that was part of the charm. Laughter echoed against the timber walls, and applause felt warmer out there, surrounded by the sea. These shows were affordable and intimate, a shared holiday treat that brought strangers together for an hour or two. As television became the mainstay of evening entertainment and piers fell into decline, many of these theaters closed. Yet for those who sat beneath those glowing stage lights, they remain a reminder of seaside magic that no screen can replace. Number 7. Ice cream from a beach tricycle. Before the familiar jingle of ice cream vans took over, the beach tricycle was king. These sturdy bikes, with a large insulated box mounted at the front, were pedaled along the sand by sunburned vendors in caps and short sleeves. They'd ring a small bell as they passed, drawing children like seagulls to chips. Inside the box, blocks of ice cream sat wrapped in paper, ready to be sliced and sandwiched between wafers or crowned with raspberry syrup. The cones were simple, no sprinkles or novelty flavors, but they tasted of summer. Parents would hand over coins warm from their pockets, and you'd walk away with ice cream dripping down your fingers before you'd even taken a bite. Health regulations, competition from vans, and changes in tourism gradually made them a rarity, but the memory of chasing that tricycle down the promenade is one you can still taste. Number 6. Holiday camps, fancy dress competitions. In the heyday of British holiday camps, the fancy dress night was a highlight of the week. Families would spend hours crafting costumes from whatever they could find. Crepe paper, cardboard, old curtains, even tinfoil. Children became pirates, princesses, and clowns. Parents sometimes joined in, turning up as everything from milkmen to space travelers. On the big night, the camp hall would be packed. Redcoats or the resident host calling each name as contestants paraded under bright lights. There was laughter, applause, and the occasional wardrobe mishap when a pin came loose mid-walk. Prizes ranged from a box of chocolates to a certificate you'd proudly hang on your wall at home. As holiday camps modernized and entertainment became more professional, the homespun magic of these contests faded. But for those who remember, nothing beat the feeling of stepping out in a costume you'd made together as a family. Number 5. Donkey rides on the beach. For generations of children, a seaside holiday wasn't complete without a donkey ride. The donkeys, gentle and patient, would stand in a neat row, waiting for the next excited rider. You'd climb into the small saddle, gripping the handle as the donkey plodded along the sand, led by an attendant in rolled-up trousers and a flat cap. The salty wind in your hair, the squeak of leather straps, and the crunch of hooves on wet sand made it unforgettable. Parents would wave from the deck chairs, cameras ready to capture the moment. The tradition stretched back to Victorian times, but by the 1980s, concerns over animal welfare, tighter regulations, and new forms of entertainment meant fewer donkeys on British beaches. Today, they survive only in a handful of resorts, but for many, the memory of that slow, steady walk along the shoreline is as much a part of childhood as sandcastles and ice cream. Number 4. Caravan holidays in the rain. There was nothing quite like the sound of rain drumming on a caravan roof. For many British families, summer meant hitching up the caravan and heading to the coast, no matter what the forecast said. You'd arrive, unpack into the tiny cupboards, and make the most of every inch of space. Days were spent exploring the beach, flying kites, or walking into town for a bag of chips. But when the rain set in, the magic didn't stop. Gather around the little table for board games, with the kettle whistling and the smell of tea filling the air. At night, you'd fall asleep to the sound of the waves mixed with the gentle patter of rain. By the 1980s, foreign holidays tempted many away, but for those who remember, a week in a caravan was a reminder that the best holidays weren't about the weather. They were about being together. Number 3. Seaside landladies and B&B rules. Stepping into a seaside B&B in the 1960s was like stepping into someone's front room, because in many ways you were. The landlady greeted you at the door with a firm handshake, a warm smile, and a list of rules. Breakfast was at 8 sharp, no muddy shoes in the hallway, and definitely no cooking in the room. Bedrooms were neat and tidy, with floral bedspreads, a little wardrobe, and a tea tray holding 2 biscuits and a kettle that took forever to boil. The bathroom was often shared, and the hot water was rationed with care. But behind the discipline was a genuine warmth. She'd ask about your day, recommend the best chippy, and remember your name the following summer. As hotels modernized and self-catering grew popular, this unique blend of formality and friendliness began to fade, leaving behind fond stories of landladies who ran their homes with pride. Number 2. Punch and Judy shows on the beach. That's the way to do it. Those words delivered in that unmistakable squeaky voice could stop you mid-lick of an ice cream. The Punch and Judy show was more than just seaside entertainment. It was a tradition stretching back over a century. Set inside a brightly striped booth on the sand, the puppets came to life in tales of mischief and mayhem. You'd gather with a crowd of children, knees sandy, parents leaning on the seawall, all laughing together at the same jokes year after year. There was a rhythm to it, the slapstick antics, the familiar catchphrases, and the satisfying end, when justice, of a sort, was served. By the 1980s, these shows were becoming rarer, nudged aside by arcades, fun fairs, and changing tastes. Yet, for those who remember them, Punch and Judy isn't just a show. It's the soundtrack of a carefree afternoon by the sea. Number 1. Butlin's Redcoats. If you ever holidayed at Butlin's between the 50s and 80s, you'll know the Redcoats weren't just staff, they were part of the magic. Dressed in their bright crimson jackets, they seemed to radiate cheer, greeting you with a grin that made you feel instantly at home. Mornings started with sing-alongs and silly games on the lawn. Afternoons were filled with treasure hunts, donkey derbies, and the occasional water balloon fight. Evenings brought talent shows and dances, with Redcoats leading the floor like seasoned entertainers. They were masters of making you forget the weather, your worries, and the outside world. For many children, they were like holiday heroes, familiar faces you looked for year after year. As foreign package holidays grew in popularity during the 70s and 80s, fewer families stayed at seaside camps, and with them went the daily magic of the Redcoats' endless energy and laughter. These traditions may have slipped quietly into the past, but for those who lived them, they remain vivid, as real as the cry of the gulls or the warmth of sand between your toes. They were never about luxury or perfection. They were about being together, finding joy in small things, and creating moments that seemed to belong to a slower, kinder world. Perhaps you remember the smell of a guest house breakfast drifting up the stairs, the thrill of spotting your first rock pool crab, or the proud weight of a holiday postcard sent with love. Those days remind us that the best memories aren't made by spending more, but by cherishing what we have. Which of these traditions takes you straight back? Share your memories in the comments. We'd love to hear them. And if this trip down memory lane warmed your heart, please like, subscribe, and join us for more journeys into Britain's past.